Okay, I think it has started. You may have disconnection with what we do here, but anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Betty and I'm the director of the Brisbane French Festival. It's my great pleasure to be here today with Benjamin Vitale. I will introduce Benjamin in a minute, but I just want to wish you all a happy Bastille Day. Bonne fête du 14 juillet à tous nos compatriotes. It was very important for us this week as part of the cultural webinars to be talking about lifestyle because bread is part of the French culture, same as wine and champagne and croissant, which we'll talk about in an hour. Bread is so important that in 2018, Emmanuel Macron really pushed for the baguette to become part of the UNESCO cultural treasure. So it shows you how important it is for French people to talk about our breads today. Today we are celebrating Bastille Day, and I just wanted to give you a bit of history on what happened on that day. So in 1773 and 1774, the wheat harvest has been really bad. So the stock was getting really low. So the government has decided that they should put all the stock aside and make sure the price goes up. So the price went up and French people ran out of bread. So that's how it all started. That's how people ended up in the streets calling for bread. We want bread. They ended up having to change and put more wheat onto the market. And that means that King Louis XVI was from then on called Le Boulanger, and Marie Antoinette was called La Boulangère. So the baker and the bakeress were the people that they tried to get when it got worse a few years later. So the woman went in the street after the flower revolution, and they started to chase the royal couple because of all the problems that had in France. So here we go, celebrating Bastille Day, talking about bread because it is all linked together. You may have met Benjamin. Benjamin was with us doing the masterclasses last year on doing bread. Today, we just want to make it clear, this is not a masterclass. The masterclasses will happen in October when we do the French Festival. But we wanted to take this opportunity to share a few tips with you because with the current situation and the self-isolation we've been in, a lot of people have been started to make their own bread. And even before that conference started, we have received so many questions for Benjamin that it's going to be a long Q&A afterwards. So Benjamin arrived in Australia in 2018. Before that, he started his apprenticeship in Paris, and he has worked in a bakery with Eric Kaiser, who is master about bread, and I even have a book at home about Eric Kaiser. So it's very important to mention that because now that Benjamin has arrived in Australia, he's been able to compare the way he worked in France and the way he's now working in Australia. Benjamin will tell you a bit more about what he does, but he's actually the boulanger for Mika Brasserie, Mika Patisserie, King Street Bakery, and Morachet. So I'd like you to welcome Benjamin with us. So Benjamin, if you want to tell us a bit more about what makes a French bread and who you are and what you're going to show us today.
Okay, so my name is Benjamin. I'm glad to be here today to give you some tips and technique about making French bread. So when I first arrived in Australia in 2018, I met Chen Kelam, who is my actual boss. And he was just opening King Street Bakery. We've created, how can I say that?
You can say in French, I'm sure people will get it.
Yeah, no, like a way to sell bread, a way to do bread, like French bread, reputation, that was the word, sorry.
You started a tradition of your own on
yes.
how to make bread in Brisbane.
Yes, and that was pretty successful. And now we've got a second shop, Micah, plus a Montreal restaurant as well. So yeah, that's very good. So what makes a French bread? To me, could be the process. But first of all, it's the French baguette. If you think about bread, it's French bread, at least you think about the French baguette. So everyone is able to make bread, which is true, but everyone is not able to do good bread. As you probably know, we only need few ingredients to make bread, which are the flour, water, yeast and salt. You can also add some sourdough or replace the yeast by the sourdough if you want, which would be two different technique and a very good technique. Yeah, I mean the adding sourdough to your recipe, to your dough, is a very good advantage for the final product. What you guys need to understand is when you mix the dough is alive because the yeast is alive, and the yeast needs to get certain temperature, which will be around 24 degrees at the end of the mixing, to be able to breathe, to be able to be active. It's pretty much same as this. If the weather is too cold, we're gonna feel too cold. If the weather is too hot, will be too hot. I would say that 25 degrees for a human is a very good temperature that you feel good. So that's the same for the yeast. So to calculate the temperature at the end of the mixing, there's many things to think about, which are the temperature of the kitchen, the temperature of the flour, and then you can calculate your temperature of your dough. So depending of the dough you're gonna make, the mixing you're gonna do, and a lot of many things, other things, then you will get a certain temperature of your water, which is pretty hard to understand. It took me a while to be able to do good bread and to understand well the dough. Anyway, when the mixing finishes, this is exactly when the first fermentation starts, which is called bulk fermentation. And then after the shaping, you start the second fermentation, okay? To me, the bulk fermentation is the more important one because this is where the fermentation is very important. This one will be more important than in the second one because you're gonna get fermentation as a mass, as a big quantity of dough, and not just this dough, just a piece of dough. Also, what you're gonna be careful of is when you mix your dough, if you reach the good temperature, then you need to let your dough rest for hours before pre-shaping. Sometimes you will need to fold the dough. Fold the dough will allow your bread to gain strength, your dough, sorry, which is very important. Otherwise, you might have a very flat product. Also, I can't tell you how many times you should fold the dough because it depends on the many things, and one more time it depends of what product you want to do. But you should always fold your dough, almost always. Then comes the second part of the fermentation after the shaping. This one is most of the time is not as long as the first one. For example, for a traditional baguette, if you shape the baguette, you will let it rest for, let's say, around 30 minutes before baking. And when you arrive to the stage of baking, so what you should use is a deck, like a stone. You should put your bread on. The stone should be very, very, very hot, around 250 degrees. And you need to slash the bread to release the carbon dioxide, and also to give a nice aspect to your baguette or to any product, actually. Very important as well is to inject steam while you're baking. Otherwise, you won't get a nice coloration, not bright one. That's how you make bread, more or less.
That's very interesting. So earlier in the conversation, you said that you can make bread using yeast or sourdough. During the last few months, people have been making sourdough bread at home. So when you put sourdough, you don't put yeast. Why do you put sourdough? What difference does it make to your bread?
Okay, so you can use both yeast and sourdough. That's actually what we do, except for one bread, the dark rye, that we don't use any yeast. But if we use yeast, it's just to give an activation to the bread, to the dough, a bit quicker than only with sourdough. But making a bread only with sourdough is possible, only with yeast as well. The thing is, if you only use sourdough, then you need to get a longer fermentation, which will be very, very good. And adding some sourdough in your dough has many advantages, as giving a nice coloration to the crust at the end of the baking. It also gives you a better conservation thanks to the acidity contained in the sourdough. You're gonna get irregular holes inside the crumb, which is a very high quality of which is sign of high quality for a baker. And yeah, you give another taste to your bread as well, because you develop other acid as a lactic one with sourdough.
So when we were preparing the questions last night, I said, lads, how do you recognize a good bread? How do you know you've succeeded in making your bread? And my daughter said, you do like in ratatouille, you put it next to you here and you hear the crust. So to you, what makes a good bread? Like, is the crust something specific to the way we do bread in France? Because I know we put a lot of emphasis on our crust. So how do you know you've succeeded in making a good bread?
Crust is very important. Nice crust, dark crust, very nice. But what I would say is, if you can see some holes, like a lot of holes inside the crumb, that's to me the best sign of high quality of your bread. If you go to any supermarket in France or even in Australia, you're gonna buy a baguette and just open it and just check out the crumb. We'll see it's very dense, it's very white. What bread to me is not a quality bread. So if you can use some farm flour, rustic flour, let's just go for it. That's much better. But yeah, I would say high hydration. Use sourdough if possible, or yeast. But if you want to use only yeast, use as not a lot, less as possible, and that's it.
So you worked in France, you worked in Australia. When you arrived here, what did you see as a change for you? Like the techniques, the equipment, the flour, the humidity in the air, because we're in Brisbane. What was a major challenge for you to start making bread here?
That was definitely the humidity, especially during summer, where the humidity is very high. And I was very, very disappointed because I try to do very good bread, and even if you let it dry in the oven, because that's what you're supposed to do when the humidity is very high, you need to let it dry, let dry your product in the oven. But even doing that, 2 hours later, the bread becomes just soft, but you can't do anything anyway. So after working with Australian, that was okay. Technique's pretty much the same. But then I just need to adapt. For example, if I need to do one more fold compared to what I was doing in France, I will do it. But that doesn't change a lot, just the humidity, which is very, very high. That's it.
Am I correct in saying that I've heard before, my husband told me, in the way that the flour on that prepared, like years and years ago, flour was very industrial, bread was really industrial, and there's been a big movement, especially with Eric Kaiser, to go back to more traditional flours, the way they ground the seeds and everything. So it's really important, that flour. Do you think using organic flour makes a difference, or?
So I have worked with organic flour for years and for normal flour as well. I know that working with organic flour is harder than with normal one, because the mill, they don't use any pesticide, and which means the flour might not be the same the week after, because you can't control anything without pesticide. But yeah, it's always, I guess it's always better to work with organic one, but it's not bad to work with normal one as well. So It depends. I wouldn't say the taste is better. To me, the taste doesn't change anything. It's more in your mind, but it's still good. It's still good.
So we definitely can use Australian flowers, but in terms of technique, do you think bakers in France let their dough proof longer than what they traditionally do here in the bakeries, or how long do you have to leave it for? Do you go for a slow proofing in the fridge? Do you leave it on the bench at normal temperature? What do you recommend?
So the longer the longer fermentation is, the better is, which means you don't let proof your bread in the fridge. You can do that because under 3 or 4 degrees, the yeast is no longer active. So that doesn't make sense to say, oh, I let proof my bread in the fridge. That doesn't make sense. So what you're gonna do is work on your build fermentation, which is the first one, and just work outside on the bench. For example, for the baguette that you can see in front of you, we do the dough the day before. So, for example, if you buy a baguette at 7 a.m. on a Monday, that means one baker was working on a Sunday night doing that bread. So what we do is we mix the dough, we fold 3 times, and after 3 hours outside, we just keep on the fridge, and we work the dough the day after. Will appear in the fridge, but very, very, very slow. So you can say, oh, the taste comes from that period. No, the taste comes from the end of the mixing until the dough gets 4 degrees inside.
You talk a lot about temperatures. So do you think my oven at home would make the same result as your oven here?
Yeah, of course not.
Shame, I have to come here tomorrow morning. So what's the difference?
So we use a deck oven, which is an oven made with stone, actually. And we have a steam injection inside, which is very, very important. Yours can't reach, can reach 250, 260 degrees. If you open the door just to check your bread, the temperature is going to drop, which is not the case with my oven because my oven is much stronger. And yes, we have that steam injection, which is very, very important. Won't be the same as if you just pour some water in your oven.
So thank you very much for that. I think there's a lot of questions coming through the chat. I can't see the chat from here, but feel free to write your questions in the chat while we go and have a look at what's coming through from your end. Did you want to show us a bit of technique on what we can do to improve our bread at home? So here you go. Maybe we'll find them.
So as I told you, this is a traditional baguette that my colleague made yesterday. So for example, if I come the day after, I have my dough here in that container, just take it out, then I start to divide it. So the weight is around 350 grams for one baguette. So you first need to pre-shape, and then you need to let it rest for, I would say 30 minutes. One more time, it's never the same. So you need to just understand the dough. But once the dough is ready to be shaped, you just take the dough, you flatten a little bit, but not too much. Otherwise, you take out all the gas contained inside, and you first fold one time, okay? Then you first a second time, and the third time. It's not like a fold. You just need to close your baguette. And just roll it. That's a nice size. That's a good size. If it's too long, probably would be too long too thin, which is not what we want for a baguette. Something really important as well, when you pre-shape the dough, you need to get a really regular pre-shaping, because if not, you're gonna get irregular shaping, which is not the case here. This is perfectly regular because the pre-shaping was okay. And then from that point, you just leave on the couche or on anything for 30 minutes, more or less before baking.
Questions coming through for you. Do you use freezing baskets?
No.
You don't. Okay.
No, we don't.
I've got another question coming through.
Sorry, except for the dark rye. Yeah, we do this one.
Dark rye.
The dark rye is a bread with 100% of water, which is very, very high level of water. No yeast, only sourdough. And this is a bread that you can't shape. Actually, that's why you need a basket for this one, because there's no gluten. So you need to give him the form that you want at the end. So yes, you need a basket, but that's the only one.
Okay. Brigitte wants to know, what do you think about the baguette recipe she has without any temps de pouce? Pretty?
Yeah. So
you can be honest, she will be fine.
you need a proving time. I mean, you can do bread without letting proof. So yeah, I don't understand.
You don't understand. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll ask Brigitte if she can tell us the recipe. Sophie wants to know, can you please explain the difference with the percentage of protein in flours and how that affects the making of bread? I noticed there's a big difference with French and regular Aussie flour.
Okay, so to make bread, you need around at least 12% of protein, but it can be too high, because if it's too high, then you won't be able to shape it. But if you don't have enough protein in the flour, in the wheat, then same issue, because there will not be any réseau glutineux in French. Don't know the term in English, but without gluten, normally you can make bread, except if you do like a gluten-free bread, you need to bake in a tin. Otherwise, yeah, you need gluten. So if the proportion of protein is too high, that's not good. If it's too low, it's not good as well. That's why we've discovered that around 12-13% is pretty nice ratio of protein to make classic French bread.
Okay, but that's really good. I've got another question coming through from Rod. Rod wants to know if it's better to knead the dough by hand or use a machine such as a KitchenAid type of device.
Well, if you come here and try to, well, it depends. It depends of the quantity, of course. Doing by hand is more traditional, which is very nice. You could be pro for yourself if you do it. We don't have that time. We can do that because we do very, very, very big quantity. Well, yeah, I would say if you can do it, I guess the mixer is gonna mix better than you, of course, because of the movement of the hook. But you still can do it with your hand, of course. That's how I learned at school. So I'm able to do both, but I'm not able to do big quantity by hand. Of course not.
Okay. So the baguette we've got here, that's gonna go down on the shelves unless I take it home. But when did you start making that one?
So this one has been made. The dough has been made at least 24 hours ago, minimum.
Okay.
So as I said, if you come at 7 a.m. on any day, the dough has been made the day before, 24 hours earlier, at least.
So that takes 5 minutes to eat it, but it took you 24 hours to make it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I've got Rod is also asking if you do run masterclasses. So you may do one at the French Festival in October, but are you going to be starting masterclasses anytime soon?
Yeah, that's the plan. We don't have any date for now because of the situation, the virus, and everything. But yeah, that's the goal. If you have a look to the kitchen just here, this is the pastry area. Now we're gonna do some pastry, some viennoiseries class, master class, and bread class as well. So yes, when, I don't know, hopefully soon.
So the best thing would be to follow the social media. This is called Lumière Events, where we at the moment. So as soon as the master classes will start, if you follow them on Facebook or on social media, I'm sure you'll find that. There are more questions coming through. One is interesting. How come does it happen that any bakery in France makes good bread? You always get good bread in France. Is there a reason for it?
Yeah, not really. Depends where. If you go So I'm from Paris, and I know that in Paris it's pretty easy to find good bread in the suburb as well. But if you go to Normandy, even south of France, depends where, but it's pretty hard to find good bread. So yeah, it's true, but not true at the same time. It depends.
Not that true. Question from Georgina. She wants to know, how do you tell the temperature in the dough?
Okay, so that's pretty hard to understand. So I'm gonna try to be clear. It's even hard for me to, it was hard for me to understand, but you need to do a calcul, which is, for example, for that product, for the baguette, okay, we'll say we have a base temperature, which will be 65 degrees, okay? So that base temperature can change depending of, so what bread you do, what kind of mixing, slow speed, second speed, okay? But let's say this one is 55 degrees. To know the water temperature, you need to do, 65 degrees minus the temperature of your kitchen, which will be, let's say, 20 degrees, minus the temperature of your flour, which should be more or less the same because you always stock the flour in your kitchen. So minus 20 as well, which will give you 25 degrees. That means you need to use a 25 degrees water temperature, and then you will get around 24 degrees dough temperature at the end of your mixing. But one more time, it depends of what bread you want to do, what kind of mixing, what kind of mixer as well. Depends of the temperature in the kitchen, the humidity, a lot of things. It's really, you just don't pour some water and mix. That doesn't work.
So when you have your sandwich jambon beurre today for lunch, I want you to have special thoughts for all the bakers who calculate the temperature of the bread you're going to eat in 2 minutes. So that's quite fascinating, actually, to know how much you put in there. Can you recommend a good home cook recipe for baguette? You probably don't have one, but.
Well, I can say you take 1 kilo of flour, you put at least 70% of hydration, which will be 700 of water, 18 grams of salt, and then depending of if you want to use yeast or sourdough, I would say put only 3 gram yeast and 150 gram of sourdough. Mix the dough, first speed if you can, second speed if you reckon that you need it. Fold the dough 2-3 times, let it in a container overnight, and work it the day after. So pre-shape it, shape it, and bake it 250 degrees, depending of the weight of your product, but it's around 20 minutes for 3 to 400 grams of pattern, which we steam, inject steam.
So when you cook your bread at home, do you recommend we put a stone in the oven rather than a crock pot? Because a lot of people do their bread in crock pots. Is that how you call them?
I don't know why.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so you would put a stone in your oven?
Yeah, of course, yeah, okay. A stone.
Okay, I do have a few more questions coming through. We've still got time for questions. So time between your folds, how much time would you leave in between the folds?
One more time, it depends of your product, but what we do normally, it's about 30 minutes each during each fold. But sometimes you will need to let them rest for 45 minutes, sometimes only 20 minutes. It just depends on what you do, what's the product. But let's say that 30 minutes is a good average.
And how many times would you fold?
For example, this one, we fold it 3 times.
Okay.
For the baguette.
And can you oven knead the dough?
Well, it's never good.
Never good.
Yeah, never good. So the less you work the dough with your hand or with the mixer, the better will be the result. And if you can avoid mixing second speed as well, that's the best. That's very good.
Now we're coming to very personal questions. Would you recommend your favorite boulangerie in Paris?
Yeah, my ex-boss, yeah.
Is it still Rue Monge in Paris?
No, not this. No, it's not Eric Kaiser anymore.
Okay.
Because I worked for Eric Kaiser for 2 years, then for 7 years with my ex-boss. He has a bakery in Rue du Rocher, Paris 8e. And that's why I fall in love with my craft. It's actually thanks to him, and because he's a very artisan baker and he wants to do the things very, very right. And he's one of the few bakers using no yeast actually to do the bread, like white bread, seeded bread, rye bread, wholemeal bread. So yeah, I really recommend this one. Maison Echt Paris.
Maison Echt Paris, here's for you.
Yeah.
With the recipe you just gave us, do you use the yeast plus the sourdough?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do, but you don't need to use that's your choice. That's up to you. You can use sourdough, you can use yeast, you can use both. If you use both, use the yeast, because the sourdough will give you an activation as the yeast does, but not as much as the yeast. So depends. That's up to you. Just be careful. If you only use sourdough, then you need to get a long, very long fermentation, maybe over 2 days, which is good. We need to put just a little bit of yeast. For example, for the baguette, we use only 3 grams per kilo, which is nothing. For all the bread, the white bread, the rye, and the wholemeal, we only use 4 grams per kilo flour, which is good, which is very low.
Okay, I've got a question which I don't understand. Maybe you do. Maybe you show how to fold in the fridge, retard, or bench, whatever that means. Folding it. Do you want to?
Yeah, so we fold, but we leave on a bench. So that was a question?
I don't know.
I guess so.
I just passed it on to you.
Once you put the bread on the fridge, that means the bread needs to rest, like overnight, for like the baguette, for example. But otherwise, you don't have any. You just shouldn't do that. If you put it in the fridge, that means you want to stop the fermentation. So most of the time, it's because your dough is overproof, or most of the time, it's just because you want to work the dough the day after, like we do for the baguette.
Okay. We've got a question from Matthias. Why some cheap white bread and no brand are so light and tasteless, while some others are heavy and so yummy?
Okay, so to me, quality bread means light and not heavy. So if it's light, to me, it's pretty good. Heavy and good, yeah, it can be the rye bread, but to me, heavy white bread is not a good bread. It's not quality bread. So yeah, it depends. It depends.
So how many types of bread do you prepare here?
So we've got the baguette, we've got the white bread, we've got the seeded bread, the wholemeal, the rye, the dark rye. And with the base of the white one, for example, we do plenty of others bread, like the fruit loaf, we do the chorizo bread, fennel bread, we do a lot. I think during the weekend we are about over 20 different products just in the bakery area, which is a lot. Okay.
Personal question, what's your favorite bread to eat?
Baguette, I guess.
Baguette, and what is the one you prefer to make?
The dark rye, yeah.
Dark rye, that's interesting. Okay. Do you make your sourdough with white flour or rye flour?
So we do it with white flour. Well, it's not white flour, it's stone ground flour, which is farm flour. But I know many people do that with the rye flour. So you're not gonna develop the same aroma. Yeah. But both of them are really interesting.
Okay. Another question from Jerry. What temperature do you think his oven should be on?
Maximum as you can. So we bake at 250, but our oven is very strong. So at home, if you can reach 260, 270, just do it, because I'm pretty sure even if you set up 260, it won't reach 260. So like the ideal one for a baguette or for any bread that you can see in front of me, it's about between 240 and 250, 55. So yeah, average 250.
Please feel free to send a couple more questions. I think we'll be wrapping up in about 5 minutes. It's extremely interesting, but with everything we do, I think we I think French people always use their five senses, so it's really hard to go virtual and talk about bread because you don't get the smell we get from what's happening at the back. You can't touch the door, you can't feel it, you just view it. So it's very important as well that you do attend one of the masterclasses with Benjamin, because I think we just give tips and tricks on how to make bread, but my conclusion would be that you have to feel it, you have to love it, and you just have to adapt to the external conditions. So there's no such thing as a proper recipe. You just have to go with the day, if it's been raining for 2 days or if it's hot and dry, and it depends how you like it, whether you like it to be light or you like it to be heavy. And so you just have to keep on doing it, practice, and make sure you get what you want, because we all like different breads. I'll just check if we have a couple more questions. Matthias is asking, can any flour be used for bread making, like corn flour, chestnut flour, any type of flour?
So yes, you can. So we're actually doing a gluten-free bread with corn flour since 1 or 2 weeks, but I'm not an expert in that because to me, making bread means gluten, so it doesn't mean any gluten-free flour. But yes, I guess you can. I know that in Portugal they do a lot of cornbread, maybe as well in the South America. But yeah, I'm not an expert, but I can tell you that you can do it.
You can. Leanne wants to know, you said earlier to add soda to your sourdough. How much would you recommend?
Sourdough?
How much soda do you add? Do you add soda? Baking soda?
No, I didn't say
no. Okay, so you don't, Leanne.
No.
How often do you feed your sourdough? Every morning you do that? Or?
Yeah, we do that every day.
Every day.
So you should do it every day, but you can also do it maximum every 2 days. One more time, mixing, refreshing sourdough doesn't only mean adding flour and water. You need to control the pH. You need to understand if it's acid enough or not. In that case, if you think that your sourdough is too strong, you can add some salt to stop the fermentation, because as you said, the salt kills everyone. I mean, if you eat too much salt, you're gonna die. Sorry. It's pretty much the same for the sourdough. So if you need to slow down the fermentation, you can add some salt. On the other hand, if you think that your sourdough is too weak, then you can add some sugar as honey or malt if you want, and just to activate the fermentation, to reactivate the fermentation.
Okay, and I have some good news coming through. We've had a message from Sourdough Essentials, our neighbor in West End. And we will be picking up people in the audience today who have registered for the masterclass. They are offering 2 extra large bread proofing baskets and a lame bread cutting bread, as well as a baguette tray. So thanks for registering. I think we will check your emails, because we will definitely send you more information about that. I'll check if we have a couple more questions before we let you go back to your work. I think that's as much as we have. I've got one more question. Do you have a sourdough recipe to give?
Yeah, I can give you one. So what you're gonna do is you can buy like apple juice or pineapple juice or anything sweet. You let it rot outside for 1 or 2 days. You could see some bubble on the top, which is when you need to start to refresh to add the flour and the water. And so you start one day, then you need to refresh the day after or 2 days after. And you need to do that for 1 week. One more time, if you think that this is not strong enough, you can add some honey. And then after 1 week, 10 days, I would say that your sourdough will be ready. So if you want to do a liquid sourdough, you need to add, for 1 kilo of flour, I always add a little bit more of water, around 10%. So which will be 1 liter and 1 gram of water. And you do that every day or every 2 days. And after 1 week, 10 days, your sourdough will be ready.
And I've heard someone say last year when you did the masterclass that the sourdough you've been using here has been fed every day since when? For how long?
150 years now.
150 years. So hey, you better start now.
Yeah.
You will never compete with that sourdough. So yeah.
But that doesn't mean you can't have a sourdough active after 1 week. You still can do that.
Okay, well, I think that's wonderful. I'm sure people have got so many more questions, but it's answered a lot of those questions that we've had today. So thank you very much, Benjamin, and I can't wait to have lunch now. All right, well, thank you, and we will join Julien in about 15 minutes for the croissant webinar. If you haven't registered yet, please do so. And unfortunately, we're not here at MUSGRAVE Park to celebrate Bastille Day with you, but we are definitely working on putting this together for October. Meanwhile, I hope you enjoyed these free webinars. You will find on the right-hand side of your screen that, yes, we are asking for donation to help the festival survive 2020. So any donation will help, even $5 will help us to go a long way. So thank you very much for listening. Merci, Benjamin.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Okay, we'll see you very soon.